Hello, and welcome to Making the System Visible, facilitating stakeholder engagement using the tools of system thinking, or how to get a group of people to sit down to better understand a problem. Systems thinking is focused on what is. It forces us to focus on the underlying conditions that give rise to a problem we want to address, and helps us to understand the context before we try to come up with solutions. One of the tenets of local living economies is a diversity of people. As leaders, we can help these diverse groups of people to work together to achieve a common good. Yet some common difficulties often arise when trying to solve complex questions, such as how do we move people forward as a group when everyone agrees on the problem but also champions a different solution? Or how can we prevent a bloody battle of ideas as people fight to make their solution the one solution? Also, how do we make sure that our solutions don't make the problem worse or create other problems, which can lead to a black hole from which there is no escape? And finally, how do we know that our intended solution actually doesn't do the opposite of what we want it to do? How do we know our interventions are effective? These are the joys of dealing with complex systems. We are surrounded by complex systems, especially as we dive into how local living economies function. These systems are not readily apparent, have a multitude of variables and relationships, and have multiple access points. Systems thinking facilitation helps us draw upon the collective intelligence of the group we are working with to understand the system as it is to help us to intervene to make it better. It helps us to identify the nodes and relationships where we can make the most difference. Systems thinking helps us to focus on how different variables affect each other. Too often, however, we isolate and categorize only a few variables in a system and never see how they relate to the larger system. For instance, we might see how sweatshops cause human suffering, but not realize how our own buying habits help to contribute to sweatshops. To add to the complexity of systems, they can look different to different stakeholders. Just as two people can look at the Eiffel Tower and describe it using different words, to create a better view of a system, it is important to remember that the different perspectives diverse stakeholders bring to the system are all valid and valuable and can lead to a clearer view. Which is why it's important to have a diverse group of stakeholders when performing this work. And part of the value of this work is going through the process itself. Simply asking these questions is an intervention in itself. While it may seem counterintuitive to spend so much time with the express purpose of not coming up with any answers, participating in this process and helping illuminate the systems that people live in can change how people interact with those systems. Facilitating systems thinking workshops can be messy, frustrating, and confusing, but the benefits can be truly stunning and important. So, how do you run a systems thinking facilitation? When setting up a workshop, plan for a time where you can have the undivided attention of 5 to 20 people for a 6 to 7 hour block of time. When recruiting stakeholders and before the workshop, you need to be clear on your objective and communicate it. Is the purpose to identify leverage points to strengthening a local food system? Is it maybe to figure out solutions to chronic unemployment? Or even how to solve a personal goal of spending less time on the computer? It is important to communicate the system you're trying to understand, the scope and boundaries of the system, and to get the right people in the room. The more clearly you can frame the purpose of the session, the better. You'll also need the following supplies: paper, large post-it notes, markers, whiteboards, and of course food and drink to keep people happy. Perhaps most importantly, you need to have the right people in the room. The right people have first-hand knowledge of the system you're mapping, represent diverse perspectives, are deeply invested in changing the system, and are able to commit to the entire process. Keeping the size of the group under 20 is important in order for everyone to be able to participate and to make the best use of everyone's time. For this presentation, we will use a facilitation that took place at BGI as an example. The purpose of the facilitation was to illuminate the textile apparel industry. The participants included experts in the apparel industry, sustainability professionals, as well as people experienced in illuminating systems. To begin the process, you start with a framing question. What is the recurring event or pattern that you want to change? The apparel workshop revolved around the question, what recurring event or pattern in the textile and apparel industry are you interested in changing? To get the juices flowing, have people break up into pairs and share stories related to the question. What do you know about the apparel industry? How does it affect you? What problems do you see? The hardest part is to stay in the problem and not to jump to solutions. Techniques that can help to do this include the 5 whys, where you drill down on a specific statement by asking why 5 times, and reflective listening, where one person talks and the other person focuses on reframing and asking questions without adding new information. Once people have had time to tell their stories, the next step is to have them isolate one variable and create a behavior over time graph. A variable is something that can go up or down, like miles driven, people that are unemployed, or pounds of waste generated. Using a simple XY graph, use one line to sketch how this variable has changed over time. Is it increasing? Decreasing? Maybe it increased then decreased? Have participants share their variables with the group, both visually and verbally. Ask questions until each variable is clear and precise. After all participants have shared their variable, it is time to figure out which variable is the most pressing. Through discussion and voting, make the group choose one variable that is critical to the system you are trying to understand. This variable will be the centerpiece for drawing the system diagram. In the session on the waste in the apparel industry, the key variable identified was the amount of textile waste that goes into landfills. Now that the group has decided on the focal point for the exploration process, it's time to broaden the scope again and identify other variables that have an impact. Ask participants to work in pairs to brainstorm other variables that influence or have an impact on the central variable and write them on post-it notes. Some of the other variables from people's story may be brought back in during this step. After 5 minutes of brainstorming, share the variables generated aloud, taking time to clarify as needed. Once people feel comfortable with the variables listed, it is time to zoom back out to the next level to decide on the system boundary and scope that serve your purpose. For example, when talking about textiles, there is discussion on whether to focus on the textile waste from apparel or to include textiles from carpet and other uses. Boundaries can also relate to geography. Are you going to focus on one specific country or a group of countries? What parts of the process are within the scope of the system you're looking at? Are you looking at the entire supply chain or just the process within one specific factory? Once the scope and boundary are clear, select about 10 variables, including the central one, and put them on a whiteboard. Next, it is time to make the system visible. You'll be connecting the variables into what is called a causal loop diagram to illuminate how they affect each other. There are 2 types of relationships that variables can have, either positive or negative. The positive and negative have nothing to do with whether the relationship is good or bad. It is not a value judgment. A positive relationship means that the variables move in the same direction, such as sunshine and happiness. As the amount of sunshine goes up, people's happiness goes up, which is why people in the Midwest are pretty happy. Conversely, as the amount of sunshine decreases, happiness decreases. Sorry, satellites and Portlanders. That is a positive relationship. A negative relationship is one where the variables move opposite of each other. As one goes up, the other goes down. Or as one goes down, the other goes up, like temperature and the number of articles of clothing I'm wearing. As the temperature goes up, the fewer articles of clothes I wear. Conversely, as the temperature decreases, the more clothes I wear. This is a negative relationship. Draw lines between variables that are related to each other until you think you have all the connections drawn. This can be one of the messiest and time-consuming parts of the process. As a facilitator, you can help participants navigate this process by focusing on listening and helping participants to clarify their insights. Remind them to be patient and stay focused. Most likely, you'll have to cut this process short because of time. There are always more connections. Let participants know this is normal. People will be absorbed in seeing additional connections and wanting to add more variables. As a facilitator, keep to the agreed upon time frame, saving a little bit of time for the group to reflect and share major insights and key takeaways from the sessions. When it seems like all the connections have been drawn, take a step back and look at the system. Which variables or nodes have the most connections? What are the variables that could cause the most change in the system? Where are the high leverage points where a little change could cause a big effect? What has become apparent to participants that people weren't aware of at the beginning of the day? And that is how you do a systems thinking facilitation. Systems thinking is a tool that can help make visible what currently is. By having a better idea of what is, we can focus our efforts on the most effective leverage points to create change. Now that we can see the system, we can begin imagining solutions, answering the question of what might be.